Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour with my friend and yours, the goatiest of all F1 minds to have ever goated, the one that they call Mr. Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Cameron. Very well. Bit of rain here in Spain this morning, which is good. The rain is falling mainly on the plane here.
Let's go. Ever the wordsmith, Mr. Windsor.
Well, I don't take any credit for that. I think that's My Fair Lady, isn't it?
Yeah, so something like that. I don't know the reference, but I've heard it a gazillion times before.
Professor Higgins.
Let's talk about F1, Peter, because I feel like there's a very many F1-centric thread this morning at which we need to pull, as is customary, on the back of the Singapore Grand Prix. What do you think was the biggest story?
Well, I think in terms of looking back at this race, it will be Tom Stallard saying to Oscar Piastri, Oscar, we're getting into the point where potentially if there's a safety car, you could come in for softs. What do you think? And Oscar replying, I don't know, mate. The way things are going, I don't care. Make your own mind up. I thought that was just brilliant. And I presume he switched the radio off then. I hope he did. Because for me, that summed it up. And, you know, if there's a gloves off moment between Oscar and Lando, it was this race. And if there was a revelation of Zach's master plan of how it was all going to unfold, and he was going to reveal this master plan of how he was going to manage these two guys towards the World Championship finale, then I guess we saw it in Singapore, and what a mess it is.
Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Talk to me about the incident in the first instance between Lando and Oscar and Max going through lap one. Who done it? Who do you think was to take the blame?
Well, it's taken Lando a long time, but I guess that was payback for Hungary last year, was it? When Oscar just came down to the million miles an hour and Lando had to turn left in the middle of the right-hander and Max did the same in concert. So it was a little bit the same. It wasn't quite as dramatic. I mean, Lando obviously was going down the inside when Oscar thought he had got the corner, as you would. You know, it's your teammate there. You've all made reasonably clean starts. Then it's George, Max, and then Oscar. And all of a sudden, Lando's there on his left, which, if for teammates, first corner, it's not what you do, in my opinion. And I think that's an example of how Zach's master plan has plenty of flaws in it, because that's the most dangerous part of the race in which to damage a car, in which to eliminate both cars. We've seen that happen in the past. And that is the section of the race where you need to be very circumspect. And it was lap one, lap two, lap three, fine. But opening lap, then I think it was overly aggressive by Lando. And if you look at the freeze frames, you can see Oscar's actually giving him room. And having given him room, Lando just stays with it and then realizes he's got much too fast an approach speed on Max and has to bail out of that and flick to the right and hits Oscar, touches wheels with Oscar, clips Max's right rear, and away they go. Oscar just misses the guardrail or the concrete wall on the right in full understeer. It's one thing to miss it with a bit of oversteer, which, great drivers with skill as per Oscar Piastri can do. But when you got understeer and you've lost the front, that is bad news. Very lucky, I would say, more than anything else, that he didn't hit the wall there. And why did Lando do that? If he was so desperate to be at the front, why didn't he qualify better? That's the bottom line. And it was unnecessary risk-taking at that first corner. And there's, I think, under the heading of this massive cliche that's developing around the Singapore Grand Prix of it being impossible to overtake, I take issue with that, because there is that strong DRS zone in the first sector. And we saw Fernando using that. And if you get a good run on somebody out of turn three, if you've got good traction and you're using that section very well, of course you can get a toe there and get past. So, Lando had, as I said, well before the race, indeed, going back to the live streams last week, for me, the McLaren was the best car going into Singapore, and it remains the best car. Lando qualified poorly, nearly took his teammate out, damaged the front wing, didn't seem to make much difference. And then in a lame Red Bull with the tyres 6 laps older, he still couldn't pass Max towards the end, which was amazing. But he wasn't that well, I don't think. So all credit to Lando for finishing and getting points, I guess, P3, but not a good first corner by Lando Norris. And I think he can, big thanks to Oscar Piastri, that there wasn't a multi-car shunt there.
Humongous thanks to Oscar Piastri. Let's talk about Lando very quickly, Peter, because I leave the race weekend ever so slightly frustrated with Lando because I thought he was incredible. So the move on lap one was questionable, but very aggressive nevertheless. And Lando, in his own mind at least, did what he needed to do. 1.5 seconds is the delta that you need to overtake around here. So historically, at the very least, it ends up in a procession. And Lando thought asymmetric risk, get something done on lap one, going into the first portion of the race. But I'm frustrated, Peter, like you said. Where was the brilliant Lando Norris on Saturday? What is it?
I'm just opening the press release now to see what he said. Not a great day. I just wasn't able to drive at the limit of where I needed to be. That's a pretty poor admission in qualifying for a race as important as the Singapore Grand Prix. Some things for us to work on, but hopefully we can make some progress tomorrow. Well, he made progress, but he only made progress because he didn't drive very well in qualifying. I mean, that's not good. And then to do that at risk of the other car in your team, I think was, it's very un-Lando-like, actually, to have done that. It was almost like it was when he started in FP3 on Saturday morning, and Will Joseph couldn't really wait to say to him, welcome back, Lando, after a really bad, scrappy Friday. And that's, that's tempting fate, isn't it? Welcome back at the beginning of FP3 after 4 laps when he's gone quite quickly. It wasn't welcome back after qualifying. and there are some issues there, that he's unable to get the lap time out of the car when he needs to put himself in a position to win a Grand Prix like Singapore. He should have been, I'm not saying he could have beaten George, it was an even fight, probably not, but he should have been right up there with George, and no reason why he shouldn't have been. The car was that good. And he struggled, he couldn't get past Max in a lame Red Bull. I say lame because there are quite a lot of things wrong with it, but worse, he was on old, hard tyres compared with Lando's, and that was not good.
Peter, I'm worried for Lando. I am worried. And the neutrals' hopes are dependent even on Lando and Norris keeping Oscar Piastri honest, right? I don't know. As brilliant as he is, it just feels like this is the Lando-Norris dichotomy. When the pressure's off, he looks a lot like any one of the greats that you could ever mention, but when the pressure's on, it's very rarely that you'll get a Monaco qualifying session out of Lando and Norris at this point.
Yeah, and he's made it worse for himself because what he's done now is ignited a fire under Oscar Piastri, right from here to the end of the year, for sure. And before the first corner in Singapore, there was some compliance probably between the two, mainly Oscar giving Lando a bit of room, but I don't think that's going to apply anymore. Regardless of what the team say to Oscar now, Oscar's going to have Mark Webber in his ear, which is a good thing, saying, mate, it's your championship. You don't get many chances. Go for it. And he's absolutely correct to do that.
So go on then, Peter. Let's talk about this McLaren dynamic because it felt a bit weird. Initially, I felt like Oscar had every right to feel hard done by the way that McLaren had treated him. They said that they were going to have conversations with both drivers to make sure whoever wins the championships, whether we were even allowed to celebrate. Well, they'd won the constructors and they didn't consider Oscar Piastri's feelings. They were all in the background while Oscar was still at the scrum. It was just like sabotage is the word that's been bandied around, aka favouritism. Are you seeing that at McLaren, Peter? Well,
this question comes up many times on live streams, and we've talked about it as well. I mean, let me be clear. There's no way in the world McLaren would ever produce anything other than the two best possible cars for their two drivers. So it's not a question of mechanical favoritism. But for the first time, we saw something I'd never seen before or heard something, which was asking a driver when he thought the other car should stop. I've never heard that before in my life. Lando Norris deciding on what Oscar Piastri's pit strategy should be. I couldn't believe it that they actually asked Lando to do that. And, I cannot remember that ever happening. So what that effectively means, well, Lando, we're 100% behind you now, mate. Your championship, your call, you're going to make calls now for when Oscar's going to stop. That's what happened in Singapore. So why won't it happen again? And that to me is the first time we've seen real favoritism towards Lando. And they may say, oh, well, he's behind in points. We want to get him up to an equal point where they've both got the same number of points going into Brazil or whatever it's going to be, some master plan they've got there. But that, to me, I mean, can you imagine Patrick Head getting on the radio to Ricardo Patrese and saying, Ricardo, when do you think we should bring Nigel Mansell in? I mean, if Nigel heard that, I mean, what do you think how would he react? I mean, I'm still absolutely gobsmacked that happened. And it was interesting, Lando's response. I think he was shocked too, because he said, oh, yeah, no, yeah. Well, he was suddenly thinking, wow, they're asking me. And I'm not surprised. He was surprised because this is unprecedented. Asking one driver when the other driver should stop. You do your own thing. And obviously you work harmoniously between the two race engineers and you try to avoid a stacked pit stop, obviously. But, you don't start asking the drivers when the other car's going to stop. And could he have permission to stop on this lap, please, Lando?
Isn't this McLaren doing their weird thing? They're always keen for the second car to cover off anybody that's behind him. And in this case, Charles Leclerc, not necessarily breathing down Oscar's neck, but they wanted to do as they did at Monza, pit Oscar first to make sure that Charles Leclerc wasn't that Oscar wasn't at risk of the Charles Leclerc undercut. But it's
of course,
like
it was that.
But it's too much, Peter, isn't it? It's like
of course it's that. But you get on the radio and you say, Lando, because we want to cover off Leclerc, Oscar's coming in now, you're coming in then. Bang, end of story. You don't say, would you mind? What do you think? Can Oscar wants to come in before you. What do you think? You okay with that, Lando? That's my point. You don't start asking one driver to make a decision about the other car. And that's what happened. On top of the first corner, when basically, as Oscar phrased it, he barged through, hit me and got in front. Then they gave the option to Lando as to when Oscar could stop. How do you think Oscar felt at the end of that race?
Not great, Peter.
Not more than not great. I would imagine absolutely, ropeable, mate. Ropeable.
Yeah.
and this will not go away. He's a professional, as I said in the video last night, and he'll be very nice about the Constructors' Championship, and he'll all this and that, and he'll say the right things. But deep down inside, I can tell you now, he'll be burning inside.
Well, let's speak to that, Peter, because this is the first time. Normally, Mr. Stoicism, Mr. Consistency is always, you barely hear a change in his tone over the radio, but this feels like it was the first time, and an inflection point as far as the McLaren intra-team relationship. I remember Oscar said, so are we cool with Lando just barging me out the way, or what? What's the go there, mate?
To his credit, though, he still said that in quite a low monotone, didn't he? It was, are we cool then? Are we that? It was. Imagine if that was Fernando, for example. A few decibels more, please. But I thought that was an interesting thing as well, because I'm sure he was thinking within the team, are we cool about that? Forget about the FIA and making a decision. In the team, are we cool about that? Or do you think within the team we should tell Lando to give that position back to me because this was not what we signed up for? But of course they misinterpreted it. They immediately thought, oh, he's thinking about will the FIA take any action? As soon as the FIA said no further action to be made, they couldn't wait to get back on the radio to Oscar and say, oh, there's no further action being taken. We'll talk about it after the race, Oscar. But of course, Oscar wanted the decision made there and then by the team, an internal thing by the team. And in the same way you can swap positions for any number of reasons. That's what I think was going on, and they misunderstood that as well.
Do you think
rather
the team
ham-fistedly?
Do you think the team should have intervened, Peter? What was the action?
I don't know. I really don't know, and you don't know. Nobody knows with respect any discussions that McLaren have actually had as part of Zach's master plan about first corners and how to behave. And so, without knowing what the ground rules are, it's very difficult to say. But I suspect the ground rules are that you gain positions if you can, but you do not run into the other car. I would suspect, if I had to make a guess, pretty logical. And guess who ran into Oscar's car? So on that basis, what's the penalty within the team? If you get a position by running into the other car, do you give it back? And he had a damaged front wing end plate. And as it turned out, it didn't actually affect his performance at all, I don't think. Maybe it did a bit, but not a lot. They didn't change the nose or anything like that. So that's a sign that presumably didn't make a lot of difference. But if you're McLaren at that point, lap one, and you're thinking Lando's got the damaged front nose, Oscar's car still looks perfect, who would you put your money on there to be the better bet in terms of taking the race to George and Max? Probably Oscar.
Yeah, fair.
He doesn't have the damaged front wing. And yet they didn't. They let Lando stay in front. And Oscar just, I think at that point, for the first time ever, probably, he just thought, what is this all about? And I think that's what we saw with Oscar yesterday. I think we just saw him a bit deflated.
Yeah. As per the message when they wanted to scenario plan in the eventuality that there's a
do whatever
safety
you
car.
want, the way things have gone today, stuff it, Yeah, exactly.
Past hatred, there is apathy and indifference, Peter.
Yeah.
Whatever. I feel bad for him. And I think you're right, Peter. This feels like an inflection point, though.
Of course, it's an inflection point in terms of eyeball to eyeball, first lap, any corners coming up and any of the remaining Grand Prix circuits. You think Oscar's going to be nice to Lando? He's leading in points now. It's another mistake from Lando, Oscar's got the points advantage. Look at Max v. Lewis in 21. Max wasn't afraid to do the odd bit of T-boning to Lewis because if they were both out, guess who that would favour? Same with Oscar.
Yeah, there is.
I'm not saying that Oscar's going to do that or he's that sort of driver, but if they're close, I can tell you who's going to break, who's going to break first. It's going to be Lando Norris.
Oof. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Talk to me about the way that the fan base is handling this, because again, it feels like I'll say this. I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on, but it's felt for a couple of weeks now like the powers that be are keen to get behind Lando, not just from a McLaren perspective, but Formula One will realise that there is a mainstream upside to having the poster boy Lando, the cover boy of British Vogue, and women want to be with him, men want to be, do you know what I mean? That sort of mainstream superstar as far as Lando Norris is concerned. The fan base, though, it feels like they're cottoning onto it. He was booed, wasn't he, Lando Norris, at the Italian Grand Prix, and then they got out the Max Verstappen being the winning guest driver at Italian Grand Prix over the past 3-4 years. And similar when Lando jumped on the podium, Oscar wasn't on the podium, but the crowd could be heard chanting Oscar, Oscar. It feels like there is a swathe, a growing push now around Oscar Piastri at the altar of perceived or an injustice or otherwise. What do you reckon to that, Peter?
Well, I can't really speak for the F1 community. That's your job, Cameron. You represent the F1 community. I represent, I don't know what. But I would say this. I think, Lando's also now got Max as an enemy, hasn't he, after what happened in qualifying. So that was another thing Lando didn't do very well at the weekend. And simultaneously, I think Oscar's feeling wonderful about George Russell and Max Verstappen because they both took points from Lando Norris. So, they're his new mates, probably, I would imagine. And given all of that. And so Lando, in one race, has managed to ostracize himself from Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, and put himself under pressure when he's at a points disadvantage to Oscar. Now, all the Vogue, I have no idea about the front cover of Vogue. All I can tell you is that he's got a pretty good golf swing, but it's not unlike his driving. It's quite stylish, but there's a technical fundamental flaw just before impact, which is, under pressure. It's not there on the practice swing, but on the race swing, if that's the right phrase, it's there. And under pressure, you can see it. It's a bit like a long corner. He just comes across the path of impact because his arms beat his body through the shot. 1 million people do that, but it's interesting to see how similar it is. Good in the practice swing, under pressure. That's why Andy Murray was better actually in the Pro-Am at Wentworth. Cool. That's all I can talk about. That's all I can refer to because I'm not in touch with the community in the way you are, as I say, Cam.
It's interesting. I feel bad for Lando because I feel like he's invested in the court of public opinion. It means really? Something. Yeah, 100%. Whether he says it or not in the scrum or the presser, he's a sensitive soul. Lando is, and I feel like that will hurt him.
So what you're saying is he hasn't been watching my channel, which was switch off from everything, focus on your side of the garage, keep your mouth shut, and become a hard, steely racing driver, focusing only on your job and doing it to the best of your ability. He hasn't been doing that.
I think he's trying, Peter. He switched off the social media, isn't he? He has switched. He's taken some action points. He switched off the social media, but you can't change your fundamental constitution, right? You're either a sensitive soul or you're not a sensitive soul. And I think Lando will care. It will bother him that he was on the podium and he'd driven a brilliant race, contention for driver of the day, and all that they can. I think so. Well, not quite.
I would have given it to Fernando Alonso before Lando Norris.
Yeah,
I would have given it to Carlos Sainz before Lando Norris.
Sainz, Fernando, Max,
and Carlos. What about Carlos's drive?
Yeah, Carlos needs to get
absolutely superb. And Max in defence on those rubbishy old hard tyres, just outstanding. And it's not a question of blocking; it's just a question of making no mistakes when there's a guy behind you on fresher tyres in a better car. And it was so easy for Max to have a lock up, run wide, do this, do that. That was the captivating essence of the last third of the race. I just thought it was spellbinding, Max's drive. And to have your engineer in your ears every lap saying 0.8, 0.7, 0.4, he's in the DRS, all that. I mean, Fernando would have ripped the radio out by then, but Max loves all that, presumably. But the pressure that Max was under and how well he drove, it's as if he's on another planet, to be honest. Just superb. And you know, for Lando not to be able to pass Max was just ridiculous, really. He should have.
He had a quicker car, didn't he? And he had
long enough. As I say, there's this whole cliche, you can't overtake at Singapore, and they get into this, dirty air and all this. Yeah, give me a break. Get on with it. Be a racer. You think Max in those situations would be just sitting there?
That's the problem, though. But do we not do... Go on then, Peter. This is an interesting one. Because do we not do the rest of this service by comparing them to the alien that is Max Verstappen? We saw him at the Nordschleife in his weekend off. He's just... I feel like almost saying that Max would have overtaken Lando is like saying, I don't know, well... I don't know.
Of course he would. If he was in the McLaren and Lando was in the Red Bull on tyres 7 laps older, you think Max wouldn't have passed him?
Oh, 1,000%.
Max wouldn't have got a run out of turn 3 and just DRS'd him going into whatever it was.
1,000%, Peter.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like saying, wouldn't Einstein have solved for the theory of relativity? It's like, of course, Max is a little bit different, I think, at this point. And I feel like we almost do Lando a disservice by comparing it. In another era, I think Lando would have been a champion already, wouldn't he, Peter? So it's just like, well,
in another era, he was Peter Collins.
Oof.
And what did Peter Collins do? He had so much respect and he revered Fangio so much that he gave his car to Fangio to enable Fangio to win the championship, even though Peter Collins, in the same race, could have won the championship. Oof. So I hope Lando does that. Gives the championship to, I don't know, Oscar.
Do you think he put it? I mean, he's got Lando.
I don't know. I can't. I mean, I have to say, I do love Lando a lot. I think he's a very funny guy. I like his personality, and I love the way he drives when he's driving well in a rhythm, particularly on street circuits. But I didn't like the way he drove at Singapore yesterday. No way. I didn't like that first corner, and I thought he was lame thereafter. Oh. And you know. I didn't like the way he qualified the car or didn't qualify the car.
Let's double click on that then, Peter, because qualifying has been quite the talking point. A lot being made of Lando and Norris not being as assertive in getting out of the way of a charging Max Verstappen on a hot lap in the dying embers of Q3. Are you buying or selling the fact that Lando affected to the downside Max's ability to put it on pole?
Well, as I said in the video, it's odd how McLaren used that system of talking about the corners rather than the gap in seconds. And maybe that's a sort of cop-out of, well, we can never get into trouble with the FIA because we're telling our drivers what's going on. But we all know that is nothing like as accurate as talking about the gap in seconds. And the last bit of information Lando had before that chicane was Max is on the corner behind you. Which means what? You know, you have no feel for how quickly he's gaining the ground, what sort of pace Max is doing, and all he had before that was just, you know, you're on turn 14, he's on 13, now you're on 15, he's on 14. What does that mean? You know, you've got different lengths of straights between the corners. And I think McLaren to me, that's the wrong way to do it, and that's not correct. And so in defense of Lando, I would say that given the information he had, he basically did everything more or less okay, right on the edge of what's acceptable, on the basis that quite obviously the FIA took no action. But if you look at the way most drivers are, even in FP3, even FP2, if there's a driver going to catch them just before the entry to a corner, they basically stop and pull to the left or the right or whatever it is and let that guy go. And that's what Lando did not do. He basically just continued at the same pace he was going, and to the point where as soon as Max saw him on eye line, he could see that his turning point was exactly where Lando was, and they had to bail out of the lap. But because the information was kind of given to Lando, and because he was on the edge of, what's acceptable, he got away with it. And that's why Max said, I'll remember that. And he will remember it, believe me. and it won't be just once that he'll remember it. He'll remember it 50 times now. And it won't be doing the same in return. It'll be doing something else. You wait.
Yeah. Do you think Max would have put it on pole?
It's very, very, you and I had this discussion already. On the basis that he was down sector 1, slightly ahead sector 2, and he'd always been very good sector 3, but he had to find about 0.2 compared with his previous lap in sector 3. It would have been, obviously, it's a platitude to say it would have been close. I think he would have, actually. I've kind of changed the way I think, because I thought about it on Saturday, because he's so good at doing these last millisecond things in qualifying. And that was his best sector. Sector 3 was always his best sector. He's so good through that double apex left, just brilliant through there. And I think he might have got it by a hundredth, might have. Certainly, obviously we'll never know, thanks to Lando.
He was very, very close, apparently, Max. When you break down the mini sector of sector 3, so in the first instance on the previous lap, he'd gained a 10th on George through that final section of the track. And then apparently he was carrying 2/10 through sector 2, but he gained 0.08, so he's only a 10th off going into those final couple of turns. So it's like,
that's my point. But we'll never know. George wasn't bad through there, got to say.
No, either. Jeez, honestly,
George's best sector was sector 1 and turns 1, 2, 3. He was unbelievable. And I compared him with Senna, the way he was driving through 1, 2, 3, actually.
Incredible.
He was superb through there.
He wasn't too bad. Go on then, talk to me about George. In fact, before we get to George, I just want to pick your brain on one other Oscar thing. Did you see Oscar jumping out the car when he was getting... So I feel like the way that McLaren communicated with Oscar was, let's say, lacking in finesse and sensitivity. It was all like, oh, you're way, rah, rah, McLaren, 2-time Constructors champions. And then when Oscar's about to get out the car, Zach Brown comes over the radio and says, congratulations, Oscar. We're 2-time champions. Thank you. And Oscar just yanks you hear him, right?
Talk about bad timing to come out with something as crass as that. There was poor Zach. All anybody wanted to talk about was how that race had panned out between Oscar and Lando, and how annoyed obviously Oscar was. And to some extent, in my case, I seem to be the only person in the world, but in my case, the absurd tyre choice for Max Verstappen. And yet there was Zach trying to remind everybody that he just won the Constructors' Championship, as if anybody cared, But absolutely. I think Oscar did exactly the right thing there. Brilliant.
He's a good lad, is Oscar. And then he puts on a brave face and he's having to talk to the guys back at the factory. Thank you so much. He's a good man. He's Oscar. He's a good egg, better man than I, because that would have worked out differently. I don't think I could have put a brave face on it like Oscar did. Well, he's obviously got mates back at the factory, so in some respects that would have been okay for him, I think. But it would have been, there's a time and a place to do that, and it's when he goes back to the factory next, that's the time to do that. Not after a race like that, when he's just had all those things thrown in his face. 100%. To put a foot,
the team should have realised that, I think.
Yeah, sensitivity. They season to date, all they've tried to do is talk about sensitivity and rules of engagement, and now all of a sudden it's like they're more consistently inconsistent than the FIA, which is why I think there's a lot of support growing around Oscar Piastri, and people are now desperate for that dude to get it over the line in 2025.
Yeah, but but we have the consistency now. We have the Zach master plan, and it is to let Lando decide the strategy of Oscar. Simple. It's no more discussion, no more compromise. That's it. Lando, Oscar wants to come in. You okay with that? He wants to undercut you. You okay with that, Lando?
Crazy.
Brilliant.
Crazy. Brilliant
Yeah,
stuff.
it is. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It's
I was talking to Mark Slade the other day. We had him on the show. What a great engineer. What a great guy. And he was bemoaning the fact that Daniel Ricciardo is not still in Formula One and how good Daniel was. He said he was just brilliant to work with. And, I'm still astonished that McLaren decided to fire him, to be honest. I'm not saying that Oscar wasn't good enough to replace him. Of course, Oscar is a world-class, world championship winning, Grand Prix winning driver. But he had a pretty stable team there with Lando and Daniel. Or you run the two Aussies, Daniel and Oscar. Actually be a great team, I think. You'd say, two Frenchmen, you never put them together like Gasly and Ocon. Yeah, well, what happened there. But two Aussies actually of that nature, I think, would have been really, really good. I'd love to have seen Oscar Piastri with Daniel in the other car. Oof. Imagine the radio between the two. Be superb. Anyway, they didn't do it, and they blew it all apart, and they got rid of Daniel, and I think it's a great shame. Great shame. What's Daniel doing now, anyway?
He's a marketing man's dream, isn't he? I see him pop up on adverts all the while.
He's not driving anything though anymore.
No.
It's a shame, isn't it? He's so good.
Yeah, well, he'll have a career doing something. Maybe he'll be the next Saturday Night Live. It'll pop up somewhere, Peter. I think
he's got lots of, he's got great talent in a number of areas, but it's just a shame we're not seeing him in Formula One. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, let's get on.
It happens. Go on then, just to put a full stop on Max's defensive masterclass. Lap 36, Lando Norris. The delta between Lando and Max for second place, 2.2 seconds. Meaning, therefore, for the best part of, 28 laps. Max Verstappen holds off a fire-breathing dragon in Lando Norris, who's got an ostensibly quicker car. That's not bad going, Gay, from this Max fella. He's not too bad, this Mr. Verstappen fella, Peter. Will win a couple of championships if he keeps his nose clean, eh?
I was absolutely convinced Lando was going to beat him. I couldn't see any way in the world he wouldn't finish second in that race with Max in the car as it was with those older tyres. And yet Max managed to keep P2. And he should feel great about that. I personally feel sick that he wasn't able to take the race to George had he done the correct thing, or had the team done the correct thing and started them on mediums. But having made that mistake and obviously not got the lead into the first corner, which was never going to happen in my opinion, he then did a good job on those soft tyres to extend the stint for about as long as he did. But the race was over then. The only way he could have recovered from that would have been if there'd been some safety cars, or if he'd managed to continue with that on a very slow race pace, extend the softs so long that he could run maybe mediums the back end of the race. But that was a big ask. And so, the minute he didn't get the lead, which was no surprise, the race was over for Max Verstappen, to be honest. So that was a great shame. But then again, we saw this brilliant exhibition of defense from him. So at least we had that.
When Max finds himself in these difficult positions, it almost brings out the best in him, right? That's when you see Max's ability, when he hasn't got the car, or when he's struggling with the upshifts over the course of a 62-lap Singapore Grand Prix. That's when you see just how good Max is and can be. Speak to me very quickly about this soft compound tyre choice, Peter, because you said on your review that you disagree and you think it was a bad decision. If I play devil's advocate for a second, surely, I mean, if you want to win the Euro Millions, as implausible as that might be in probabilistic terms, surely you've got to buy yourself a lottery ticket. Do you not think that Red Bull gave Max the best opportunity by putting him on softs, invest in turn one PLC, and then if you don't get it done, you don't get it done?
Well, I see the logic of putting him on softs to get a slight advantage from the dirty side of the grid. But bear in mind the difference between the soft and the medium on the same bit of road, not clean or dirty, was 1.6 meters, and that he's 8 meters behind George and it's 6 seconds before they hit the brakes for the first corner. You're basically saying to Max, okay, Max, you've got two options for the race. Strategy one is we'll put you on softs. It'll help you get off the dirty side of the grid. And if you get in front of George, there's a reasonable chance you could win the race. But remember, the softs are going to go off. He's on mediums, and he's still going to be pretty quick back end of your stint. And there's half a chance he's going to be able to get you. But at least you can be racing him like that. Or we put you on the mediums, so you're on the same footing as the McLarens and George and Antonelli, and you can take the race to all of those at any point of the race because you're basically going to be on the same strategy. But you might have a problem off the line because you're on the dirty side of the grid. Maybe Piastri will get you, but you'll be able to race him because you have the same compound and the same strategy. And we know we've got a very, very good car on mediums, and we know we've got very good tire management now in that setup. Which do you want? I can't believe he wouldn't have taken option B. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not even suggesting that it was Max's choice, or it was, I presume the strategy department made that decision. But for me, you've got, how many laps is the race? 57 or something?
62.
62, okay. So he's got 61 laps of racing on parity with the same tyres as everybody else, mediums, which the Red Bull's really good on. Or he's got one lap where he can maybe get the lead, and if he doesn't, the race is gone. Yeah. Which would you take? I just did not understand that. Okay, they could also have said, and there's half a chance we're going to have a safety car or two. Look at the number of safety cars. There's only been one race before this where there's been no intervention. So, but can you bank on that now? Obviously not. No. We've had quite a lot of races without safety cars. So to me, I just don't understand. They had a great race car on mediums there and a great race car on hards, obviously. And yet they put him on softs. Yeah. And he was never, ever going to pass George. Now, okay, he was second. He was ahead of Oscar, and he was potentially, therefore, ahead of this first corner accident between Oscar and Lando, even though he did get hit by Lando. But, I'd still rather have seen him on mediums racing Oscar and being up there with them with the right tyres at the right time, because this is Max Verstappen we're talking about. We're not talking about a normal racing driver. We're talking about a very, very good racing driver. And if he's on the same tyres, I think he would have been very near George, may not have beaten him, but I think he might have been in a position to push George into a mistake or something happened. It certainly would have been close the whole way if he'd been on mediums. As it was on softs, we just, it was just a race of defense really from lap one.
Yeah.
Which is a great shame. Great shame for the fans, great shame for everybody that wanted to see a good Grand Prix. And we didn't get it because of that decision. And it's not the first time they've made that decision like that. What happened in Spain? I still can't believe that. And here's another point, just to go back to Singapore. He didn't even have a new set of softs anyway. He was starting on used softs. Everybody else at the back of the field, all the rabbits at the back that went for softs, at least they all had sort of 3 new sets of softs because they were all out in Q1. But there's Max on a used set of softs. Now, I don't know what the stats are between a new set of mediums and an old set of softs, but I'd be willing to bet that 1.6 meters probably down to 1.3.
Yeah, it's a good shout. It's a good shout.
And don't forget the tire warming now is not as good as it used to be. So the tires wouldn't have been as hot as in the old days. So even less reason for him to have been able to get George into turn one. And he didn't do it just to mitigate against maybe Oscar getting him. He did it because they wanted to get him in front of George.
Yeah.
And that was the wrong call. It was a sort of knee-jerk, cliche call based on it's impossible to overtake around Singapore. Well, I don't buy that. And I think, put another way, if Max had got the lead from George, he would have then been on the softs. And then you can imagine what the radio would have been. Okay, control the pace, extend the stint as much as you can, Max, you're doing well. George is in DRS. Oh, you're 1.2 seconds, 1 second. Tires are starting to go off. When shall I come in? George is suddenly a second behind. DRS, half a second behind, out of turn 3, moves to the left, and he's got the inside run into 5. You can just see what would have happened. George would have got him, even if Max had got the lead on softs, in my opinion.
Yeah,
there's no way Max would have pulled away at a second a lap on softs because he had to extend the stint for as long as possible. So it had to be as easy as he could if he got the lead. So where was the upside in this choice of softs? Everybody's saying, "Oh yeah, it was the right tire. Got to do it. Got to go for these tiny things." Well, he had the whole race to win, and yet they blew it in 1 lap.
Yeah,
So, I don't believe that risk was worth taking. I really don't.
I think I understand. You build a really good case, Peter. That it's not the most that the expected value isn't the highest by going on softs, but it because it's Max and he's missed a dive bomb and into turn one and he's just done something similar at the Nordschleife. I'm not saying it was the right decision, but I understand why they make it at the altar of asymmetric risk. I get it. I don't think it was anywhere near as bad a decision as what they did in
No.
Barcelona. I
Oh,
wouldn't
I do.
compare
I
it to.
do. Because I think they had a race potentially to win and they blew it.
Oof.
And I think it's just as bad. They may not have won Barcelona, but they could have been second
Yeah.
or third. This one was a race win, potential race win. He had a very quick car,
Yeah.
as we've just been talking, potentially quick enough to have got the pole. And he, bearing in mind it's Max Verstappen we're talking about, I think he could have won that race on medium hard combination. That was the right combination to be on. That was the best for the Red Bull as well. And the minute he didn't get the lead, it was just like, woo, all the air's gone out of the balloon.
It was done.
And it was just like, what are they thinking? For me, it was anyway. I'm
Fair.
sorry, that's my opinion. And I know a lot of people disagree with it. So I've been thinking about it overnight, but I reinforce it by the fact that he was on used softs. He wasn't even on new softs.
Make a good
So,
case.
if he'd had a new set of softs, maybe, but he didn't. Nobody else did either. That's one of the reasons they all started on mediums, probably. None of the front runners, that is. So, you know, what was the point?
You make a very good case, Mr. Windsor, and far for it to be me to argue
Well,
with you.
I'm sure Red Bull think I'm talking tripe, and I'm sure a lot of other people probably do because a lot of people seem to disagree. But I can only express my opinion, and that's it. And that's it. What can I say?
I think the added wrinkle of the fact that he was on scrubbed softs,
Yeah.
that makes a difference, and how good Red Bull were on the mediums. I think that's something that many people haven't accounted for in that equation.
And also what you haven't accounted for is Max versus George around Singapore, both on mediums within one lap of one another, new sets of mediums. That's a serious motor race. Yeah, George would have been very, very good. But Max would have been very, very good too.
Yeah.
And the Max you just described, the dive bombing, this and that. You think Max wouldn't have done something in the course of a 62-lap race?
Yeah, probably. But to that point, Peter, you segued brilliantly onto King George Russell. George spoke in the post-race presser about mistakes that he made in 2022. I mean, he's made a lot of mistakes around Singapore with past his prologue. As near as makes the difference every year, he'll find the barrier. He found the barrier in free practice. But he spoke that he said that in the race there was a calm that came over him, that notwithstanding the change of conditions in the lead up, that he felt he was at the pool. He felt like he was in his flow state, that he's a different driver now in 2025 than he was in 23. What did you make of George's performance, Peter? Are we witnessing, is this the dawn of a George versus Max era? Do you think George has it in him, has the minerals to take it to a Maximilian Verstappen if he's given equal-ish machinery?
Well, as I said in my video, he's a long corner driver and Max is a short corner driver. So all things being equal, with the same grip level, the same balance, Max over a Grand Prix distance will be able to massage the car through more variables and more small mistakes than George Russell. But having said that, and I also said this in the video, in terms of long corner drivers, George in 2025 is as good as it gets. And I said, for viewers that were too young ever to have seen Ayrton Senna drive, have a look at George, because he's not that far away from the way Ayrton drove and the way he energizes the car, but keeps it very, very longitudinal. He's square to the road, but there's a lot of energy. He's squeezing through the car all the time. It's not a sort of Lando, fairly sort of relaxed feel to the car. It's not an Oscar mini power slide. It is boom, 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 boom. But it looks beautiful. All the straight lines are joined. And I said, turn one, you'd never get the McLaren Mercedes drivers doing what he was doing with the revs, going in and right down to third gear into turn one in qualifying on light fuel. They're all going in fourth. And there's George going in at 11.5 in third, just energizing the rear like crazy and using it really well, really well. I mean, he was unbelievably quick through that section of road. And I defy anybody to have been quicker than George there, purely because of the way he was using the revs going in there. And some of it maybe was engine braking, but a lot of it was just due to what he wanted from the feel of the car in terms of the moment he turned in from his straight line entry. And that's pure Ayrton Senna. And if you take out the fact that George doesn't have to worry about the perfect hand-foot synchronization that Ayrton always had to worry about, well, for most of his career with the H-pattern gearbox and the foot clutch, that's gone. So that's it's simplified the job George is doing now compared with Ayrton, although obviously the other issues come up that Ayrton didn't have to deal with. So it's not as if it's suddenly easier to drive a Formula One car. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that whole business of the perfect synchronization that Ayrton had is not a factor for George because he has perfect synchronization through the paddle shifts. And so he can be pretty near to Ayrton. And he drove an Ayrton race yesterday. But I think we shouldn't get too carried away on Cloud George because he won a race beautifully and without blemish on a day when Red Bull messed up their tyre strategy and Max wasn't in a position to fight him. That's how I see the Singapore Grand Prix. If Max had been on mediums, I think we would have seen a slightly different George. Maybe not, but I think under pressure, Max behind him, second, half a second for 50 laps, I think George might have made a mistake or two. But he didn't, and he was able to get into this beautiful zone that he found. And yeah, good luck to him. I hope the race felt very short and very sweet, and he enjoyed every minute of it. I'm sure he did. And he looked great when he got out of the car.
As a Max Verstappen fan, what concerns me about George now with momentum, not necessarily the race. I agree with you that things could have been very different. What concerns me with George and makes me think that I've got to reappraise for his uppermost ceiling is the qualifying, Peter. I'm not sure that he probably had a marginally quicker car than Red Bull, but the fact that he was ultimately a tenth and a half down the road, notwithstanding whatever happened between Max and Lando at Singapore, and then another tenth and a half quicker than Max in Canada, I'm like, hang on, that feels a bit special now, and he's doing it semi-consistently. If you can beat Max, if Max is who we think he is, and I think he is one of the greatest that we've ever seen, then the F1 maths dictates that George could potentially be on the road to similar F1 heights now.
Yeah, well, I've always said George is unbelievably quick. And, I banged on about that when Toto was about to sign him at Mercedes. He's a different deal to Valtteri Bottas. This guy's seriously fast racing driver, which of course is why Lewis didn't want him in the other car. And so in my mind, there's never been any doubt about that. And it's like he's not unbeatable any more than Ayrton Senna was unbeatable. He could beat Ayrton, as Nigel Mansell proved, as Alan Prost proved. But he's right up there in terms of long corner drivers. He's seriously good. But he's got Max on the other side, who's an unbelievably mega short corner driver. So it's a bit like Jim Clark versus Ayrton Senna. It's that sort of thing if you want to have, or Sterling Moss versus Ayrton Senna. If you take any of the great shorter corner drivers like Max, they're up against somebody who's as good as almost getting in the region of Ayrton. He's really good. He's really good.
I was particularly impressed with his attitude and his approach, Peter. As versus, if you compare him to Lando, who's like a cheeky chappy and he's got a bit of James Hunt about him and he's kind of, what I mean? But George is like straight down the line. Even hear him in the pre-race presser, he's talking about, he's clearly gone away and done his due diligence. He's talking about the Ferrari was super fast last year, and but for an incident and yellow flag in Q3, a Ferrari could have put it on. But I'm like, how do you even know this? And he knows it because he takes his craft really, really seriously. And in contrast to Lando, who's saying all this stuff in British Vogue about the championship's not my priority, that my priority's always been living a good life and being a good person and enjoying myself. I think George, like Max, only wants to win. Do you think about that, Peter?
What I think about that is I'm shocked that Lando said that. I'm shocked that he even did an interview with British Vogue. What is he thinking? Can you imagine if Jim Clark was asked to do an interview for British Vogue? He would say, well, it's a women's magazine, isn't it? What's going on? No, thank you. Leave that to Gene Shrimpton or whoever he was doing his latest photo shoot for Ford with. I mean, you wouldn't do an interview with British Vogue. What's he thinking? Anyway, let's stay away from that because, the old revs will climb. I think, yeah, I mean, George is an absolute racer, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. He always has been from the days of karting. He just all he wants to do is win, and he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He's not afraid, as you say, to do all the due diligence necessary. He's a racing driver. Why wouldn't he? But you shock me a little bit by the implication of your question, which is some drivers aren't that aware of what happened last year or the year before, or indeed 50 years before or 30 years before. I'm not saying George is a great historian, but I'm sure he's got a pretty good feel for what is significant. But then surely that's the job of every racing driver. And if they're not, then they shouldn't be in a Formula One car, really. Of course you have to do your due diligence. Of course you do. And for all Michael's bravado about, I don't really care about the past, you can be pretty sure that Michael knew everything he needed to know about the history of that circuit in the recent past, of safety car interventions, tire choices, number of pit stops, setup, wind factors, weather factors, all the things that you need to go into any Grand Prix. That's just normal homework you do from karting onwards, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think so. However, Peter, if I'm going to argue as you round third, super generous of your time as always, Mr. Windsor. If I try and play devil's advocate with you for a second on Lando's cover performance of British Vogue, does F1 not need a Lando Norris? I mean, Lewis Hamilton is coming to the end of his career and he's one of the biggest mainstream superstars. And under that aegis, he's done incredible things for attention dollars, getting and keeping them on Formula One. Doesn't Liberty Media have to be aware of the next one, the conveyor belt of mainstream stardom, with a view to enhance, I know I'm about to swear here, Peter, so cover your ears, their share price and their don't they have a fight? I'm not going to talk about fiduciary duty because we won't go there, but it is the Netflix era, and there are 18 to 35-year-old young women who love themselves some Lando Norris. So shouldn't we be clapping Lando Norris for going and doing these other bits and bobs, and in so doing broadening the scope and the viewership numbers of Formula One into new growth markets?
Don't know what to say to that. You know how I feel about all that rubbish. I don't think any of it's important. I think the only thing that matters is being a Grand Prix driver to the ultimate of your ability. Focus on the car, focus on your side of the garage, do the job, be 100% professional. That's enough in terms of being a star, if that's what the stakeholders want. And all the other stuff is not being a star. Racing drivers don't do that sort of thing, in my opinion. So it waters down the less is more philosophy, which I think was one of the great things about Bernie Ecclestone. You less is more, and the more you make it mysterious, and the more you have a dramatic mega star racing driver who just gets in the car and blows everybody away and never says anything and gets out of the car and he's in black overalls and never does any interviews, the more mystique you're going to have. So to me, all that other stuff, that wishy-washy cover of Vogue and all that, it's nonsense. I mean, Lewis Hamilton and Michael, in their own ways, have done a lot for Formula One in the United States in the way they like going to America and being on chat shows and doing all that. That's fine. And everybody finds their own thing. I mean, you could say Max going to the Nürburgring and Max partying at Ghent in the rain because he feels like it on a Thursday afternoon is also very cool and very glamorous. So, if I was Liberty and I was worried about my stakeholders, I would find whatever it is that works for that driver and make that the thing that the public can swallow and understand. Not just assume that the only way of doing it is with the front cover of Vogue and talking about how you don't really care about the championship so long as you got a great life. I mean, what does that mean? That's not actually great advertisement for Formula One, is it? Because most sports fans, and you'd have to include some Formula One fans as sports fans, I guess, love the concept of the total professional who goes out and does the job brilliantly. Tiger Woods, good example. And Roger Federer, another. But, all this contrived stuff is very short term, very gossamer, and very unrepresentative of what the sport is actually all about, I think. That's my take on it. But I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, and I certainly don't read British Vogue, and I certainly don't have any time for a race driver who says, and I'm going to have to adjust my opinion of Lando now if he actually said that. I can't believe he did. It's probably been taken out of context. But if he actually said, I don't care too much about the racing or the results, I just want to have a nice life and enjoy it and make a lot of money, then I have no respect for him at all. I can't believe he said that. I really can't, because I know you're paraphrasing a bit, and I probably paraphrased even more. But if he did say something along those lines, bang, I've lost all respect for him.
Oh, Peter. I think he said words, I'm going to try and be as precise with my language as possible, that his number one priority wasn't winning the championship, it was being a good person and having a good life, that he's not concerned with legacy and all this other stuff, that he's
well, I mean, that's fair enough in the overall context of humanity. Your number one context in life should always be, your number one objective in life should always be to be a good person, to be a better person every day. We all have to grow and learn from our mistakes and become better people. So in that sense, he probably has been quoted out of context. And if he said, that is my number one goal, my second goal is to win the World Championship and to win Grand Prix, that's fine. I totally accept that. And indeed, I respect that. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I just hope it's not taken out of context by too many people, because it's easy to do that these days, isn't it, with the media? And yeah, of course, everybody's priority ultimately is to be a better person.
It's
I would hope it is anyway.
Look at this, Lando.
I try to make it my priority. I'm not doing very well, but I try to make it mine. That's for sure.
Go on then, Peter. I'm going to read it out verbatim. In his October 2025 British Vogue feature, Lando Norris stated that enjoying his life and having fun is his first priority, with winning the championship his second. Norris
then I come back to my other one. I've lost respect, because enjoying my life and having fun isn't trying to be a better person. Trying to be a better person is actually not a lot of fun and isn't very enjoyable. It's hard work. It's auto-suggestion. It's doing the opposite of what your inner self most of the time is telling you should do. Go on, you can do that. Have another ice cream. Go on, yeah. Sit down, watch another hour of TV. When there's another voice in your head saying, no, I need to get up and do that work, or nah, ice cream's not that good for me. It's fighting that. And none of that is pleasant. It's all tough, auto-suggestion, discipline. And it seems what Lando's saying there is, oh yeah, no, I love having a lot of fun and enjoying my life. And yeah, then I'd like to win the World Championship. Doesn't sound right to me. The two don't sit well for me.
I'm with you, Mr. Windsor. I'm desperately trying to conjure up an argument. A devil's I had no idea. We're all biodimensional human beings, aren't we? We're all psychospiritual organisms, if you like. And you can listen to your inner self and listen to the voice inside you, basically your conscience, of what is the right thing to do at any given moment. Or you can avoid that and say, I just want to have fun. I want to make as much money as possible. And you'll grow more and more away from, a balanced inner being, and you'll become more animalistic. But to have that balance is not easy. To keep that balance is not easy, particularly if you're in a world where there's a lot of fame and there's a lot of money and there's a lot of this and a lot of that. But it's, everybody has their own river to swim up against the current of. And we all have that, and actually, I think being a better person is number one priority. Winning a world championship, number two priority. Actually, if you're Sterling Moss, you'd say winning Grand Prix, number two priority. Winning a world championship, number three priority. So there's that as well. It would have been kind of nice if Lando had said, instead of what he did say, if he said, yeah, my number one priority isn't actually winning a world championship, it's just winning Grand Prix. I just want to win every race. That would be quite cool, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But he didn't say that either. I don't know. I don't like talking about other people, because I'm so imperfect myself that, I think it's wrong to to talk about that side of life about other people. You can only speak for yourself, really, and look in the mirror and look deep within yourself and be honest. And that's all you can do. And if Lando was being honest as a racing driver, I've lost respect for him because, having fun is not why you should be a race driver. It's like saying to some young person, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a star. How many people say that these days? It's very sad, isn't it? And that's a little bit like that answer, isn't it? I want to be a star racing driver. Oh, and I want to win world championships second.
Right. Peter, if I'm trying to get in Lando's head. I think if Lando were here, he'd argue that having a good time and living a good life, that only catalyses his end goal, which is, his second priority, which of course is winning Drivers' Championship. I think Lando's the type of person, he'd argue that there's all different types of personalities throughout the 75-year history of Formula One who have won Drivers' Championships. And I think he'd argue that not dissimilar to Lewis, everybody says you've got to let Lewis go and roam and turn up to the Met Gala if indeed you want him to be fast in a car. I think Lando's putting forth the supposition this way, that in order to be a quick driver in a car and therefore win races and championships, he kind of needs to be a free spirit a little bit and lead a good life and have coffee with his girlfriend before qualifying. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what I think. He's worded it very poorly, but that's what I imagine his underlying sentiment is.
Yeah, in fairness to Lando, it was probably a very poorly worded question, I would imagine, and it's been taken out of context again. And you're probably right. That's probably what he's saying. I can win my championship doing it my way, which is to be more relaxed and have fun while I'm doing it, rather than to be too hyped up like, I don't know, a Michael or even an Ayrton for that matter. So maybe that's what he's saying, and that's fine, but it doesn't add up, does it? Because it doesn't actually appear that way. It doesn't seem to be working. What happened in qualifying many times this year, and what happened specifically in Singapore? That's the thing, and that's why I say I think it's time for him to change the way if that is the way he's operating still. He needs to change that, because it's not good enough to be in a car that is patently that fast, as we saw in the race on Sunday night, and only qualify wherever he was, fifth. That's not good enough. Insane.
I wish him the best. I hope he does well. And
I wish him the best. He's a sweet guy and a lovely guy, and always been a fan since Formula 3, as I've said many times. But I think he was just like, there's so much pressure on him to show that he's a racing driver that, he just went bang straight down the inside of Singapore, trying to win the Grand Prix on the first corner.
Yeah.
And in doing so, and doing what he did with Max, he's actually got a lot piling up against him now, going into the remaining races.
It's going to be interesting. Who is your pick, Mr. Windsor, as we round third base for the Drivers' Championship? If you had to put all your money on one of the drivers, the contenders being Max, Oscar and Lando, who are you going for?
Well, I'd love it to be Max now, especially after the way McLaren have messed things up in Singapore. I'd love it to be Max. Wouldn't it be unbelievable if he did? And he could still do it. And I did actually say at the start of the year that I thought he would win the Drivers' Championship when somebody pushed me in a corner and I had to nominate one person. But if it's going to be a McLaren driver, I'd like it to be Oscar now, because I think, he's been poorly treated and he's leading on points. And I think, I think I'm not saying he will, but I'd like to see him win it now, actually, after what happened in Singapore.
Yeah. I concur, Mr. Windsor.
But who actually will do it? Probably Lando.
Because he's good enough.
He's now running the team, isn't he? He's team manager. I suppose Ken Tyrrell at some point would have said to Jackie Stewart, what should we do with Francois Sever? We've only got, we've got two sets of tires. You can have one or you can have both. What would you like? And he'll say, oh, no, give me one of Francois. So in that sense, Jackie might have run Francois Sever, but, for Lando Norris to start running Oscar Piastri's pit strategy, I think is a bit poor, really.
It doesn't sit well. But the whole McLaren ethos has been that this year, Peter. I almost feel cunningly naive for thinking that they do anything different. They're always putting the thumb on the competitive landscape weighing scales, aren't they? Invert at Monza. They've always done that. Like, it just feels like,
as I keep saying, it's a sort of glad, happy team. It's all, I'm surprised that they haven't actually set up some sort of camp outside the boulevard on the grass there, the other side of the lake, with tents and stuff and bonfires, and they're all wearing garlands, and they're all wearing sort of hippie long hair, and all clapping with guitars and stuff. Isn't that what they now do at McLaren? It's that sort of feel to it, the team, I think. Yeah, everybody's part of a big family.
The United colours are better.
I don't know what Ron would think of all this. I really.
Oh my gosh!
Ron must be thinking, what are the? I mean, the other funny thing. I mean, this is only an irony, but I mean, Alistair Corbell in his days when he was running McLaren, team manager. I mean, you never ever wanted to be the first guy to stop because the mechanics were not warmed up enough. The second pit stop was always the better pit stop. So, and now it's the other way around. You know, Lando gets the first stop, perfect stop. Oscar comes in. Was it left rear, right rear, or something?
Left rear.
What an irony.
Yeah, crazy.
But that's the sort of thing. I mean, that wouldn't perturb Oscar at all, because and that's just motor racing. That's no problem at all. But this whole business of choosing, I mean, if they'd stuck to their normal plan and Oscar had come in first, would Lando have got the problem with the rear? Who knows?
This is the sliding doors, the weird.
Well, it's a bit like the room behind you now, Cameron. How do you know it actually exists if nobody's there?
The old Schrodinger's cat.
Well, Twilight Zone. I think we're going into the Twilight Zone with McLaren, actually, aren't we, this year? So it's like another world of Formula One. The glad, happy, tuning the guitars before the race and putting the straw down on the floor of the garage and that stuff. The next thing they'll be doing is wearing smocks everywhere and brewing some sort of stew in the back of the garage.
Oh, Peter.
Flowers in the hair.
Oh, Peter, too good, sir.
Well,
Mr. Windsor, as always, you've been too good. God tier level of insights each has ever seen. I can't even do the outro for laughing too much.
Well, I think Oscar will be more used to that, won't he? Because he's been in the outback a bit, and he's done all that stuff under the stars. And it's a bit of a bit shocking for him, I imagine. Come on, let's all hold hands now. Let's all hold hands. We're all part of the team now. Let's all hug one another. Come on, big hug to whoever's standing next to you.
Oh, and the irony is that's exactly what they were doing, and Oscar was watching them on the big screen.
Come on, all hold hands, hug, flowers. Let's all throw flowers. Isn't it wonderful?
Insane. Not a good look, Peter, but again, good luck with that.
How many McLaren staff would remember or would know who won the first Constructors' Championship in 1958, do you think?
Oh, no, 0%.
Well, there you go. And and Vanwall won it with no fanfare. They just won it, and that was it. Back to England, carry on. 1959's around the corner. They won on points, big deal. Now look at it's like,
it's
ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's only the Constructors' Championship, for Pete's sake.
Well, I mean, the first winners of the Constructors would be happy seeing Oscar Piastri rip out his.
It's a bit boring, though, Constructors' Championship, isn't it, compared with the real World Championship?
I think they'd take pleasure seeing Oscar rip out his
yeah,
radio.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's not interesting.
I think Oscar should have a new range of merchandise, which is a sort of radio being ripped out of its thing. And that should be the new Oscar logo.
I think it would sell very well.
Wouldn't it be great if he said, right, I'm going to Oscar Piastri press release from Oscar Piastri Racing, Mark Webber Racing, whatever it was. Oscar Piastri would like to announce that from here on in, he's not going to have any radio communication with his team at any point of the weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, including sprints. No more radio communication because it's all a waste of time anyway.
100, but it'd be
great, wouldn't it?
Might be a better driver for it, Peter, at this stage, given the way in which McLaren are operating.
Yeah, and probably it's not a problem for him because I can't imagine the contract actually says you must be in radio communication with the team during the race. It's up to them to be in radio communication with him.
No, not about You see, Peter, you're a legend as always.
Well,
Mr.
no,
Windsor.
I mean, it's just all. We keep getting these ridiculous ideas because of the whole ridiculous scenario anyway. That's the point, isn't it?
Well, the good thing for F1 fans around the world is that between now and race 24, it feels like that's all going to fade to black, and Oscar is going to give them all the beans. Like there's no more kumbaya or participation medals. Oscar wants to win a championship, and Lando and Zach and Andrea Stella are gonna. I think they're gonna find out what that looks like, and I think
Well,
the season will be
that's
best
the
for it.
problem. So I got a lot of time for Tom Stallard, really good guy, with his sporting background as well. And I'm sure he eats, sleeps, drinks this championship and the way Oscar's racing it. And yet you got to feel for him because he's got to respond, to people above him, which must be so annoying. But anyway,
Mr. Windsor, on that bombshell, you've been a legend as always, far too generous with your time. If you enjoy yourself some purple sector market-leading Peter Windsor insight and you're not subscribed to his YouTube channel, what are you doing with your life? Said without a hint of sarcasm. Get over to there, subscribe, buy yourself some merch. If you enjoy ingesting your F1 content, then get over to your favourite podcasting platform. It is the Short Corners Podcast. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, like, comment, subscribe, all of that gubbins. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, do me a favour, follow and 5 stars. You've been a legend as always, Mr. Windsor. Thank you so much for the time. You guys, between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare.